Hey y'all, it's Amanda and this is my Texas Zonate Garden, and today we're going to be talking about 5 different varieties of flowers to beat the heat for lots of summer color. So one of the questions that I get most commonly, like all the time, are there flowers that I can plant for lovely summer color even though it's crazy, crazy hot outside? So I'm going to do a 2-part series. We're going to talk about 5 plants in this video, and then I'm going to do another part where we're going to talk about 5 additional plants that grow beautifully with lots of beautiful summer color in the hot, hot weather of the North Texas area, that they're drought tolerant, and that I've had lots of experience with. Now, I'm sure I won't touch on every single flower that grows great in the summer heat, so feel free to drop any suggestions below, but let's go ahead and get started with number 1. Okay, and to be specific, the ones that we're talking about flowers that are going to bloom through the summer and into the fall, because for North Texas, our fall is actually still triple degree temps. We experience triple degree temps until October most years. So I'm looking for through the summer and into the fall. I'm also looking for plants that love full sun. And then I'm also looking for plants that can be somewhat drought tolerant. They don't have to be watered all the time every day. They can skip days. They're not necessarily going to be natives, but this is going to be a mix of some natives as well for this area, and then some additional plants that provide some amazing color throughout the summer heat. Okay, so first is Lantana, and I actually have a really detailed video coming out about Lantana where I'm going to be planting annual Lantana and perennial Lantana in my landscape, which is going to be really fun. But Lantana is definitely one of my go-to flowers for lots of beautiful color in the heat. For Lantana, it seems like the hotter it gets, the more it blooms, which is perfect for areas like mine where we will see, 60 to 90 days with no rain, 30 plus days of triple degree temps. Now, Lantana loves full sun, and when I say full sun, I mean at least 6 to 8 hours of sun. A lot of the Lantana that I plant in my area gets 10 plus hours of sun. And I do plant a lot of Lantana on the west side of my garden. So it gets full, massive sun at the end of the day when we are hitting the highest temperatures of the day. Now, Lantana tends to be a vining, flowering type of shrub. It's a fast grower once it breaks dormancy. It produces rounded clusters of small, brightly colored flowers in whites and yellows and pinks and peaches and oranges and reds and even purples. Lots of beautiful tones of flowers. A lot of them have tricolor, so the flowers will have a mix of 3 different colors. I like the ones that go from yellow to orange to pink. I think they're absolutely beautiful. They are known for being toxic to dogs, cats, and horses, so if that's something that you're worried about, you need to be aware of that. My dogs have never messed with them, but it depends on the dog, truthfully. Some dogs get into everything. Some dogs don't pay attention to anything. They do need moist soil, and they do prefer humidity. So when I say moist soil, I mean that you cannot allow the ground to go completely dry with Lantana. You do need to have some type of water system in place for them, or be willing to hand water them. Now, you don't have to hand water them every day unless the plant is recently planted. If the plant is far more established, it's going to be much more drought tolerant. I have all my Lantana hooked up to drip irrigation, and typically during the summer, during the hottest days of the summer, they're going to get watered probably once a day or once every other day for approximately 20 to 25 minutes of drip. Now, Lantana don't have to be fertilized, but fertilizing can help them some. Over fertile soil is not something they love. They love a little bit of poor soil if possible. They don't love clay soils that are overly waterlogged. They are considered invasive in Hawaii, Florida, and Arizona. They're not invasive to me. I don't find that they drop their seeds and spread in my area. That's something I've run into, but those of you who do live in the areas like Florida and Arizona, let us know if you've run into the invasive qualities of Lantana. Now on fertilizer, I forgot to touch on, if you are planting Lantana in a container, you do want to make sure you're fertilizing the container monthly, since the nutrients do run out of the container every time you water. And Lantana can be propagated and divided over the years, which is really fun. You typically want to do that in the fall, divide the plant and plant it out in towards the mid-fall to end of fall, so that it can get reestablished before the winter and be ready to come up for the next year. Now, Lantana is a mix of annuals and perennials depending on your particular zone. I have found in the past that I grow mostly annual Lantana, and I think it's just because I haven't paid attention. I would prefer to grow more perennial Lantana that gets bigger and better every year. A lot of varieties, and that, you can get a little small pot, and then they end up being 2 to 3 feet wide, which is glorious by the end of the season. So a couple of varieties that I've grown in the past are New Gold. New Gold is a perennial, bright, beautiful yellow colors. It grows massive in my area. Also Pink Caprice, which is also a perennial and grows massively in my area as well. And I really like it for its soft pink tones. And then some of the new annual varieties that I will be growing this year are Confetti. Confetti gets 3 to 5 feet wide. I am looking to utilize it across the border of my front and side gardens. And Marmalade, which is part of the Proven Winner series, which is a beautiful like tangerine pink color, tangerine orange color, which is absolutely stunning. It's really bright and bold, so I'm really excited to try that out. Now, lantanas can be grown in hanging baskets. They can be grown in raised gardens. They can be grown directly in the ground. They can be grown in containers. They can be used in a wide variety of ways. So don't feel like you have to regulate yourself just to a particular container. I think one of the great things about summer color is pulling the summer color to the front of a garden border. Towards the back, I tend to have a lot of my shrubs and such. My crepe myrtles will start blooming. My hydrangeas will start blooming. But towards the front, where I typically would have a lot of the end of my spring blooms, like my violas and my pansies, it's time for all those to come out. And I love the idea of filling it with lantana for a small pop of color now, but for a, amazing, vivid, bright colors as we go in through the summer and into the fall. I do love the summer colors towards the front of the border, since they tend to be so bright and bold. Okay, number 2 on my list is coneflower or echinacea. Now, there's a wide variety of coneflower and echinacea, some native, some not, some hybrids. Hybrids tend to be sterile, and you cannot reproduce the plant from their seeds. More the native plants like the purple echinacea, that can be propagated or grown from seed or divided over years. They are perennial in zones 3 through 9, and they're in the daisy family. They love full sun and they bloom summer to fall. I find that you do need to deadhead if you want to keep them blooming for longer. So as a flower fades, go ahead and deadhead it, but then throw the seed pod or the flower head on the ground so that wildlife can enjoy it. If you would prefer for wildlife to enjoy it on the stem, you can allow all of your flowers, once they've died back, going into seed heads, you can just leave them on the plant for the wildlife, especially in late fall through winter. However, that will slow down your blooming progress. They're not considered an aggressive plant, but they can reseed. I've never found my coneflower to reseed itself. I have to harvest the seeds and then start the seeds inside on my own. Those of you in particular areas who have found coneflower to reseed itself, let us know what areas you're located in. And I'm super jealous because I would love for my echinacea or coneflowers to reseed themselves. I would dig up those volunteer seedlings and move them all over the garden. I really find that coneflower really feels like a time of the year where not much is blooming, which I really, really love that, because during the hot summer months, in the past, I've tended to neglect the hot summer months and really focus on the spring and the fall. This year, or actually I started last year. Last year I started putting in a lot more summer blooming plants, stuff that can handle drought tolerant conditions and really, really hot conditions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what everything looks like this summer as it's had a year to grow on and get bigger in my garden. Now, coneflower and echinacea can be grown from seed, except for the hybrid varieties. Those don't typically, they're sterile, so you can't grow those by seed. That's typically just because a lot of those manufacturers or producers, they don't want you to grow their plant from seed. They want you to be able to buy more from them, which, you know, it makes sense. It's a business in the end. These are drought tolerant and seldom need fertilizer. Any kind of organic material that just falls naturally to the ground will create the fertilizer that coneflowers need. A lot of times if you over fertilize coneflowers, it will focus on leaf growth and less bloom growth. So that's something to remember as well. You can stagger the blooming time by cutting back stems. So right now, a lot of my echinacea are producing tons and tons of buds. If you want to stagger that, you can go ahead and cut out half the stems with buds and just allow one half to produce, and then the plant will produce another round of blooms coming up. That really just depends on you and what your needs are. These can be divided and transplanted in the fall. I have not divided a lot of my coneflower in the past. However, I have a beautiful powwow wildberry, which is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite varieties. It is definitely ready to be divided. So I definitely think that that's going to be part of the perennials that I'm dividing this fall. I'm doing a lot of dividing this fall because it's such a cost saver, because I don't have to go buy a new plant. It's like free plants. It's gardener math, right? So I'm looking forward to doing that. If growing in a container, make sure it's deep enough for the taproot. So an echinacea or coneflower is going to have one strong, deep taproot. So you don't want to plant it in any kind of shallow container. You want a container that's nice and deep so that that taproot can go nice and deep and hold the plant steady, but also look for nutrients and water. So that's something to remember with a coneflower. I don't plant a lot of coneflowers in containers. If I'm going to plant them in a container, it's for a fall container. And then at the end of the fall, I pull them out and plant them in the ground. I have found that they do best planted in the actual garden beds. Some of the varieties that I like are purple, which I actually purchased a standard native purple echinacea. Grow big, large, lots of profuse flowers. I did mine from bare root this year, so I'm really excited to see how they do. I'm also growing like a hybrid, which is a double scoop bubblegum variety, which is beautiful and unique. And during the garden tour, my local garden tour this past week, lots of people asked about that particular flower because it's such a unique, beautiful flower. So that's a cool one to grow. I also grow Cheyenne Spirit, which is a variety of colors. Any from a pale butter color to a deep dark red, and all the colors in between. Absolutely beautiful flower. And then one of my favorite, most prolific coneflowers to grow is the Powwow series. I've grown the Powwow Wildberry and the Powwow White. I actually just picked up Powwow White seeds from Swallowtail that I'm going to be starting up because I would like to add a lot of Powwow White to my gardens for the future. I loved for them for harvesting for cut flowers, but I also just love coneflowers left in my landscape because the blooms, the actual blooms, last for weeks at a time, which is really fun to have in the landscape. And then even once their petals have fallen off, the little seed heads are very interesting to have in your garden beds as well. Okay, y'all bear with me. I have really bad allergies and I've got like a sinus infection, the whole thing. So I feel terrible because I sound sick during this video. Okay, number 3 on my list is blanket flower or gaillardia. Now, this is a plant that if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have been like, no, I don't like that. I'm not into that. My tastes have changed over the years, and I think it's because as I become a more established gardener and as I become older with age and things are harder for me, upkeep is really hard for me. So I find myself turning more to perennials and a lot more natives in my area because they require less care. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm always going to have the annuals. I'm always going to have lots of beautiful flowers, and I'm always going to plant whatever I want. But I understand the need for having some established plants that don't need a lot of care, especially as I continue to, enlarge my gardening areas. And blanket flower or gaillardia is one of the ones I absolutely love. Now, they're easy to grow, short-lived perennials, meaning they only last about 3 to 5 years. They have a richly colored daisy-like flowers, and they get their name blanket flower because they grow in such a mounding mass that they blanket an area, which is very cool. They are very fast growers. They can be grown from seed, but if you grow them from seed, they're not going to bloom until their 2nd year. So that's something to be aware of. Typically, when you're buying them from the nursery, that is a seedling that is started and most likely will bloom when you purchase them. So those plants, they probably kept in production for a year before they are available for the public. It's Mother's Day and the kids are fighting in the back. And the dogs are barking at the fighting kids. Now, blanket flower and gaillardia is considered slightly toxic to humans, and truthfully, most plants are. Most plants are an issue. So, you know, if that's something that you're worried about, you can keep a particular area fenced off, things like that. I just try to make my kids aware of the particular flowers or plants that are toxic. My dogs don't mess with things, so I don't have to necessarily worry about that at this point. Now, blanket flowers love full sun, and they are repeat bloomers and with long lasting blooms. Their bloom will come up and last for a month. So they're very, very beautiful. And even when their petals drop off, the centers of the flowers make for a very cute display. They're little just fuzzy balls in the middle of your garden, which looks really, really good. They can benefit from some deadheading, but I find that it's not worth it. I just let them go and do their thing. They are hardy in zones 3 through 10, and they prefer poor soil except heavy clay. They need well-draining soil. So if you're like me and you have heavy clay, you want to dig up a lot of the clay in that area where you're going to plant it, backfill with compost, and then plant your plant so that it has adequate drainage. It is extremely drought tolerant once it is established, and it handles very hot, dry conditions. You do actually want to avoid over-watering blanket plants or gaillardia. Too much water, they don't like their roots to have wet feet. So that's something to definitely consider. Now, gaillardia is one that I don't have a ton of experience with yet. My favorite gaillardia is the heated up yellow from Proven Winners. That sucker blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms. However, it never comes back for me as a perennial. It works more as an annual in my particular area. I have also grown the Arizona Sun series and multiple varieties of the Arizona Sun series, which are more of the traditional colors of a blanket flower when you think of those reds and oranges and yellows. Absolutely beautiful. But if you're wanting to get started with gaillardia, I highly suggest the heated up yellow because it blooms and then it covers its dead. It just keeps blooming and blooming and blooming and blooming and blooming. And then once it gets a little cool, all the petals fall off and you just have these little like yellow ball flowers all over it. It's a wonderful plant. However, it does not work as a perennial in my area. I've definitely found that summer blooms are very neglected for me in my area. And I think it's because even though I live in Texas, I don't like the heat. It's really hard for me to go out and garden during the summer. In fact, what I do is I save a lot of my projects that I need to do for the garden during the summer because actual gardening, actual planting, like it's just not really a thing for me in the summer. I know a lot of local gardeners still do a lot of gardening during the summer. I just don't enjoy it because it is so unbelievably hot. I would find that I do a lot of maintenance during the summer. So I'm looking for weeds. I'm making sure my drip lines are established. I'm deadheading. I'm helping out plants that are, just dying because of the heat. I'd spend a lot of time doing that, watching for insects, specifically spider mites and such. But I'm really looking forward to this next year, hoping that there is more flowers blooming during the summer. While I'm talking a lot about perennials and such, at this point, there are a lot of annuals that I planted out already. They've already gotten planted out that are going to be blooming during the summer, including Gomphrena, which I'm really excited about as a cut flower. Azuratum is going to be growing straw flower. I've got that out. I do have a wide variety of new perennials that I grew from seed to me, including Zulu Warrior, which will be really fun. A perennial Veronica variety that I grew from seed from Swallowtail Seeds. So a lot of different varieties that are going to be growing this summer. So I'm really interested to see the difference this summer as compared to last summer. And I definitely think that that's something you consider if you want to start working on summer plants. You want to go ahead and start working on them now, but please understand that they might not come to fruition this year. It might be next year till you really start to see them put on growth, and even the second year where they're really, really thriving and giving you beautiful color. Gardening, you have to garden in layers, and that means layers of blooms, but layers of time. So we don't plant everything in the spring and then we're just done, right? We plant a little bit in the spring and we add a little bit more in the summer and some in the fall and into the winter. And then that's how we start to layer our garden over the seasons. Okay, number 4 is Coreopsis Tickseed. And this is a variety that I used to grow more of, and then because it wasn't a cut flower, I stopped, and now I'm leaning more back into it because, like I said, I love cut flowers, but I also understand the need for beautiful blooms during the hot weather that aren't necessarily going to be cut flowers. And Coreopsis, or also known as Tickseed, is one of those just very prolific bloomers. It's a spreader, so it spreads over an area and does a great job with weed suppression, which is really great there in the fall as well. It's very low maintenance, drought tolerant, and long blooming. There's over 80 different varieties of Tickseed. So if you don't like one particular variety, hopefully one of the other 79 will work well for you. It has a daisy-like flower, but its foliage actually smells like licorice or anise, which is kind of cool. The flower doesn't have much of a scent at all. It is native to North America and grows in upright clumps. And we like growing natives in our area. I don't grow all natives, but I definitely grow some natives, and there are massive benefits to growing natives in your area. The seeds actually resemble little ticks, which is why its nickname is Tickseed. I hate ticks, right? So I'm totally grossed out. That's what they look like. It has a moderate growth rate and is hardy in zones 2 through 8. Dies back after frost and returns in the spring. It is considered a perennial or biennial. And so perennial for me, all the varieties that I've grown so far have been perennial, and I found that they've gotten larger and larger each year, and that they can be divided, which makes me kick myself when I got rid of a couple of varieties a couple of years ago. I should have divided them and moved them to other places in my garden, but I didn't. So lesson learned, right? They bloom summer into fall, and they do benefit from some deadheading. So once they've all bloomed out, you can come through and cut back all the blooms, and then you should get an additional flush of blooms from it. They prefer full sun with good draining soil. They do not like heavy soils like heavy clay. So once again, if you're like me who has heavy clay, you want to amend that and mix that with compost before planting in your Coreopsis. There are taller varieties of Coreopsis that will need staking. I prefer the lower varieties that have like a mounding habit, and they almost act as a ground cover, but then their blooms come up on little wiry stems, which I think is very cool and beautiful. Like I said, they do need to deadhead to keep them blooming. They have good drought tolerance, but bloom more prolifically if they are regularly watered. So they can be drought tolerant and give you foliage and some blooms, but if you want more blooms, you are going to make sure that they are more regularly watered throughout the season. And then they can be divided and propagated, which, like I said, I really need to do more concentration on dividing my perennials. Perennials benefit from being divided, right? Every 3 to 5 years, they benefit from being divided if they don't have to maintain this massive plant. So especially if you have a perennial that you feel like hasn't produced as many blooms as it has in the past, or just isn't looking that great, and you've had it for a few years, it might be time to divide it into 2 plants or more plants and allow it to reestablish as a fresh new plant. And then you might get more vigorous growth the next season. Now, varieties of Coreopsis that I've grown in the past are Moonbeam, which is kind of a really pale yellowy white color, creamy color that it's a little more clear than a creamy color. It's a beautiful one. Ruby Frost is a fun one that includes like a burgundy maroon color towards the center, and then flares out to like a white creamy tone, which is beautiful. And then Rising Sun, which I think of as more of a traditional Coreopsis with a dark center and then yellow outside portions. Coreopsis is definitely something I'm going to be looking more into depth at this summer. I'd like to do a more in-depth video of it and plant several new varieties within my garden. Okay, and then number 5 on my list is one I wanted to talk about because during the garden tour, everybody asked about it. Everybody wanted to know what it is. And that is a Verbina, and I'm going to butcher this, Bonarinis. And I call it meteor showers, but that's just one of the varieties of it, one of the particular varieties. But this is a Verbena that grows on crazy long stems. Like mine is almost 6 feet tall, and it has prolific clusters of small purple blooms at the top. And it just blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms. Blooms throughout the entire season, and the blooms just grow right on top of each other like little chains. Absolutely beautiful. Very whimsical, light, airy design. Looks best at the back of your landscape. It is 2 to 5 feet tall, full sun, well-draining soil. It's hardy in zones 7 through 11, and it does reseed itself regularly. I don't find it invasive. When I find the seedlings, because now I can recognize the seedlings and what they look like, I either pull at the seedlings or I dig them up and move them to a different spot, which works really great. The stems are crazy long, and they're almost geometric in nature, so they're not rounded. They're almost like triangle or square shape, which is kind of fun and unique. They make for excellent cut flowers, and they do really, really well as dried flowers as well. They are low maintenance and heat tolerant. Mine are planted on the west side of the house against the brick. So during the hottest times of the year, they literally are getting full on west sun, and they're right against that brick, which is just radiating heat, and they look amazing. So that's important to know. They prefer moist soil but can be drought tolerant. So mine have drip lines at the base, but I don't have like very specific drip lines to the base of each of those plants. The drip lines are just more scattered every 18 inches throughout the space, and they've done really, really well over the years. Fertilizing isn't necessary. I fertilize mine maybe once a year. I don't think that that is absolutely necessary to do it all. Natural organic material in your gardens will be perfectly adequate for this particular variety of Verbena. You can collect the seeds and start seedlings inside yourself, but I will say that mine readily seeds itself, so I find volunteers everywhere, and those are really easy to dig up and move to additional places throughout your garden. Now, the varieties that I've dealt with in the past are Lollipop, which is a little bit of a shorter variety, and Meteor Showers, which is the proven winners variety of Meteor Showers, or of Verbena. And I really, really like this look. It's unlike anything else that I grow in my garden. It's a background plant that has like some wow presence. So it grows up, it grows airy, it doesn't feel heavy. It's just a really unique plant. And I'm not surprised, but it was definitely the plant everybody was drawn to at my garden tour. Everybody was asking, what is this? What is this? What is this? So it made me want to, I'm going to try to collect seeds this year and give away seeds to local gardeners, because it is such a cool plant and pollinators love it. It's always covered in butterflies, lots of butterflies all the time, which is very, very cool as well. Okay, so that takes us through part one of flowers to beat the summer heat and have beautiful summer color all season long. And I wanted to divide it into part one and part two so we could concentrate more on each individual one instead of going through them really fast or having a ridiculously long video. Although y'all know me, I love my long videos. Most of my videos are pretty long. I don't edit out a lot of stuff. I try to show you all everything. But this is a massive focus for me this year and last year. It started last year, but this year too, adding color for the summer. It's very, very important to me because truthfully, when we get to August, everything is fried. And, all my beautiful, all my beautiful phlox is gone. My petunias are dried up. I was talking with someone, I struggle with pentas and vincas in my garden. They get eaten up by some kind of insect. So I typically have a ton of those left over. The mums aren't blooming at that time. They're putting on lots of green. My hydrangeas are already done and gone at that point. I mean, there's just so much that's gone at that point in the summer. And so I really want to start focusing on making sure I have color during the summer. Color during the summer is far more important to me than any kind of winter interests. And I wish I'd realized that earlier, because I do spend a lot of time planting my violas and pansies and such for the winter. And I haven't been spending quite enough time focusing on summer color, especially summer color that can really handle the summer heat. All right, you all drop me a comment below and let me know what I missed. Specifically, we're looking for plants that are beautiful summer color, drought tolerant, and can be in full sun. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for guys that can really handle some crazy, crazy heat in my area. All of mine are hooked up to some type of drip irrigation, so they do get water on a daily basis or over every other daily basis if we don't receive rain. So that's important to remember as well. All right, you all, as always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Every time you guys like and comment, it helps grow my channel. Plus, I just really enjoy hearing from each of y'all. And be sure to check me out on my social media outlets, including Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. As always, she's a mad gardener or decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.